Hi, this is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and this is our chart lesson for Thursday, July the 12th. We started out this morning with this wedge-shaped pattern, and generally this is a kind of a reversal type pattern when you see prices working into a wedge. And you can see we finally broke the trend line here, made a new low, and then kind of rallied up most of the rest of the day until we went into this, I'd call this a trading range up there. And you really, if you were still doing any trading, you should have had your range drawn on out here, and you could see that. And it's definitely a trading range, really, from about 1 o'clock to the close. We were in this probably a 3 or 4 point trading range. This was really the last trade I saw that was really meaningful for the day, because this is just too many overlapping bars, too choppy, and by the time you got up here to this double top where you were looking at a chance to get short, or down here to get a chance to get long, it's really too late in the day. So let's go back and talk about what was fairly obvious. Um, you should have been able to find this wedge fairly simply. If you can't, you really need to work on your trend lines. And you may have even drawn this a little bit differently. You could have drawn it off of this one, but you still should get the same type pattern. And really, if you drew it off of that line, off those first couple of swings there, it probably fits better, because then you get your break, and then you get two measured legs down to a new low. Here's your first leg, then a little correction in the second leg. And so that might even be more realistic than what I had drawn. But this is what I drew right off the bat, and it seemed to hold the price action pretty good. It still give you the same, you still get the same end result no matter how you draw it, and this one was pretty obvious right here. And so hopefully you saw this wedge type pattern, or you at least had your trend line where, and the reason I think the trend line started here, like I said, this was probably more it right here. This is kind of a somewhat of a double top, a trading range, and so your trend didn't really start to the downside until right in this area, or right in here. I would say right here. So I'm thinking that probably is the better trend line. But this just goes to show you, you don't have to get it exactly right. I believe that is probably the right trend line right there. And it's still a wedge pattern. It's still the same thing. But it just kind of shows you how you can get there different ways. This is what I had on my chart as I was trading today. And your first trade was, there was actually a setup right in here that you probably could have taken, especially if you had your trend line drawn the other way. There was a second entry short right there. I didn't mark that one. It was just prior to, I believe it was just prior to the open, and I think that's why I didn't mark it. I didn't take it. No, it was right at the open. It did happen right at the open, but I really didn't get started, figure out kind of what was going on until right in here. So this was my first trade, and that was the first one I marked. But this is just a double top on a breakout. We kind of were in a trading range here, and you had this little double bottom, triple bottom across here. We broke lower, we pulled back and tested the trend line, made a double top right at the EMA. So that was a nice little setup, and that was an easy trade. Any runners would have been good for a couple of points, probably not much more. And then there was another trade here, and again, this is just a trading range right here. You can see those highs right there. You should be able to see those lows right across there. And we broke out here, so we're looking for a fail, counter trend fail to get on with the trend. And so this lets us get short up here at the high with enough room to scalp out. And it was good for a little more than a scalp, actually, depending on how you exited or how you played it. No big runners or anything. And then again, you had another little trading range right here. And again, this is just a repeat pattern of here. And this was really the first break of my trend line, is the way I was playing that. So I was still looking for a move down to a new low. But either way, you had a failed breakout, you had a second entry. There's a first leg up, a little two-legged correction, and the second leg up. That's a two-legged move. So that's a nice second entry short and an easy scalp. Again, no big runners. We just really hadn't had any movement yet. There was a possible reversal here, but this is just too many overlapping bars. It's too close to the EMA. Would have been a good trade, but I just didn't like the setup, and I wouldn't have recommended it. Now here we've got a nice move up well above the previous highs. We pull back and we test those highs in that breakout area. Let's put our line on here just so you can clearly see it, and you can kind of see that right there. I probably would have had your line right there, and you see that's a nice little pullback to the trend line off those first couple of swings right there is where I drew that line, and that's exactly where we reverse. There's one leg, a pullback, then a second leg down, then a nice, look at that nice, we ticked below there, immediately reversed, closed on its high, so that's a nice place to get long. And believe it or not, it was good for exactly 6 ticks, which is what you need to scalp out with a limit order. It's amazing how many times that'll work out on a two-legged pullback that you get just enough to get out, but you did. Wouldn't have got any runners, but here you get another chance to enter another two-legged pullback with a reversal off the trend line. This time you might have had a runner survive. If you did, it was could have been good for several points depending on how you played it. Then we had another pullback here. We actually got below the trend line right here, but it was still a good setup if you saw that and if you took it. If you didn't enter here, you had another entry here, but by that time you were way too close to the you're getting way too close to the high here, and there's no guarantee you're going to break out of there. But you did touch it, pull back, create this little trap here. You really could have entered here, but if you didn't, there was a trap here, and I didn't mark it, but I'll show it because it was worth. There's a first entry short, a second entry short that failed, and then notice how this reversed and closed on its high. So even though that was up here at this double top, it was a fairly nice trap, so you figure you're probably going to break enough to get a scalp, and you would have actually got a couple of points out of that. But then look what happened. We pull all the way back and we test that breakout area. There's the pullback, and that's a nice reversal. There's a first entry long, second leg back, so a second entry long right there, another easy scalp. And then that was pretty much it for the day. And so just make sure you draw your trend lines, your support and resistance lines, and you should be able to see this stuff. It takes practice, it takes time, and the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. But you know, if you're not sure about your lines, just continually redraw them. You know, once you start to get 2 or 3 touches, I mean, it should be pretty obvious. But let's say you had this, just to give you an example here, since we're kind of done a little early. Let's say you started out right here with your trend line like that, but then you go above it. Well, that doesn't look right. You know, it's not a good trend line. So hey, let's try it right here. And then you see you get pretty close right there, and it turns down. You get pretty close right there, then you turn, and then hey, well look, it turns right off the line. So you know you're on the right track right then. And then look how you can see how we're playing off the upper side of the line here. So that's a valid line, even the way I drew it right there. Obviously, some other people saw that, and it came into play. And then a lot of times you'll find it off your first 2 bars if they're at the right angle, about a 45-degree angle, which that is right there. And you can see that's exactly where the reversal started to happen. And a lot of people will probably ask me, why didn't I go long right there? Well, let me show you that. Yeah, that's a second entry long that triggered on that little. Let me get out where you can really see that. Yes, that's a second entry long right there, but look what happened by the time you got to go long. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This was the 6th bar that was forming before it broke above here, and it's just too flat. I mean, that's a congestion area. That's a range, and 9 times out of 10 you're going to break out of there and fail and go the other way and trap people the other way, and that's what happened. Look, it looked really bearish setting up there, and then it broke out the other end, and then it reversed again. So going long was the right move, but you just can't be too early, and you can't, it just doesn't pay to enter. Sure, this could have broke above that bar and shot off like a rocket, but it's not worth it when you get that many overlapping bars, because all that is, and if you put your lines on there, it's probably real easy to see it. And you can see that now. That's just a little trading range, and then we ticked above it and trapped everybody. And all that did was stop out a lot of the shorts, and then all of a sudden it turns and goes lower and it ticks lower, and then it stops out all the longs that got long up there. So it tricks everybody, and it stop run stops, and it tricks people in on the wrong side, and then it reverses again. Yes, you should have been looking for a long, but you need to wait for the setup, and there's usually got to be a trap or something by the time you get this many overlapping bars. And so hopefully that makes sense to you. But I'm going to wrap it up today. It's been a long week. I'm starting to feel a little better. I'm getting my voice back, so I'm starting to get back on track. But hopefully you had a good trading day today. We had a nice little, it was a little weak trend to the downside, and it looked like it was going to take off pretty strongly to the upside, and then it kind of petered out as well. So, but hopefully you had a good trading day. We'll do it again tomorrow. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.